Hello and welcome to Mr. Wingman's Gaming and Tech Channel, your source for fun and informational content. Stay tuned for the next video.
Hey guys, today I want to talk about gaming and desktop performance with default settings on your CPU. If you've got a home-built system where you've got an unlocked processor, you can make these modifications. Some you may be able to make it on your laptop, depends on the laptop model that you have. But for me, I'm running a small form factor case. I'm limited to a 240 AIO cooler. And in this particular system, I have an i9 13900K processor. This particular board, this ASRock, limits voltage some anyway, but still I'm reaching thermal limits on my CPU. If you'll notice, when you go into BIOS, you'll see that you have a power delivery profile, either baseline or BIOS default, depends on how this has been set. Currently, mine is at baseline mode, and if I scroll down here to voltage configuration, you're going to see load line calibration level 4. But the numbers I'm interested in are AC and DC load line. With this profile, these are set at 1.1 each, 1.1 and 1.1. With that setting, I want to back out of here and I want to run a couple of benchmarks and show you what kind of numbers I'm getting with this setup. So let's go ahead and boot the system, and nothing to save. Let's reboot the system and I'll show you what I'm getting there.
All right, we're booted up into the system. I want to run two applications right off the bat, which is Cinebench, and let's also run Hardware Info. Both these apps are available off the web. I'm running in sensors only mode. Let's get these down where you can see both together. I don't want to update right now. Okay, so I'm just going to run a single pass on Cinebench to see what kind of results I'm getting from my processor. What I'm looking at is core vid and vCore, also CPU temperature. As you see, just booting up the system, I reached a maximum of 56, but running 47C here. So I'm going to start one pass running on Cinebench. And immediately what you're probably going to see is that my processor is running up to 100 degrees thermal. My voltage is 1.23, 1.26, so I'm a half a point or so, maybe, yeah, half a point off, which that's pretty close setting overall. When you're running at a max setting here, these numbers should be very similar, and if the BIOS manufacturer has those numbers right and their default settings, then it should put you in that range. However, there's some other interesting changes we can make. But you see I hit almost 100 degrees Celsius right there. Let's run one other benchmark just for fun for you gamers. We're going to bring up Call of Duty. Let's go ahead and close out of here. Our number, by the way, 34376. 34376. Keep that in mind. Let's close this out. We're going to bring up Call of Duty. This is Black Ops 6. And I'm just going to run a benchmark to show you what kind of settings I'm getting here too. Now, normally if I'm pushing, you're not going to max out a processor. You're going to max out your GPU in your game. But when the processor is running with under any load at all, with those kinds of settings, it does get hot. So what you're going to see is I'm running 4K, full screen exclusive. What's my quality settings? I'm running DLSS quality. That's on a custom setting with high textures, blah, 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 blah. This is kind of a recommended setting, I think, for this particular mode, but I probably have changed a couple of these things. It's not so much the settings I'm getting, and it's not so much the frame rate I'm getting. What I'm interested in is the change in frame rate by making these changes with the processor, because a lot of people, if you're a gamer, you're going to be very sensitive to any changes and make sure that it doesn't negatively affect your frame rate. So let's run a benchmark test as soon as it loads up. And again, these are our default settings from BIOS with 1.1, 1.1 load line, and yours may vary, obviously going to vary based on your motherboard manufacturer, what CPU CPU that you're running, etc. But it doesn't really matter what CPU you're running. If you have the ability to change these settings, I'm going to show you in a second how to find information, find the suggested settings that may work better for you. And it's not going to take you 3 days of research to try to figure that out. All right. I'd rather be playing Call of Duty right now instead of watching the benchmark. Relatively addicted to the game, but I wanted to make this video to try to help you all out too. A lot of people complain about fan noise. I certainly was having a lot of fan noise on my system before making these changes. There are some other in-bias changes you can make to your fan too. For those that are running AI cooler, remember that this is not like an air-cooled system where you have a fan speed that changes immediately based on your CPU temperature. You just set your pump speed to full speed and delay some of your levels so that you don't ramp up and ramp down too quickly, because that pump is always moving the water and carrying heat away from your CPU. Anyway, let's move back to this. So 143, 121, 113 low. I'm running on 120 refresh rate monitor, an OLED LG CX panel, and this is good enough for me. As long as I'm getting close to 120 frames a second, not really dipping below that much, I'm pretty happy. 143 FPS average frame per second. So what I want to do now is drop out of here, and I want to reboot the system. Well, actually, I already know what numbers I was going to put in, but you need to find that out. So let's pull up Copilot. And this will work for anybody, for any processor. But all we're going to type here is, what are the recommended AC DC Loadline settings for an i9? And of course, you're going to put whatever whatever CPU you have here. Loadline calibration 4, if I remember, that was already set on 4. But AC/DC 0.2, 1.02. So that's significantly different than what was in my BIOS already. I mean, this was more than a full point off. But let's remember these, 1.2 and 1.02. So again, these settings will vary. Punch in your processor, see what your recommended are, and then that's a good starting point. So let's stop here. We'll reboot the system, and then we'll come back and run some more benchmarks.
Okay, we're booted back into BIOS, and you can see I'm on baseline profile. Again, the voltage, my calibration was 4 on Loadline calibration as it was recommended, but 1.1 and 1.1, that's not what we want. So let's make these changes. I'm going to change my delivery mode just to performance, but I'm also going to drop down into voltage configuration, and I'm going to override these settings to, what did it say, 0.2 and 1.02. Let's make it 0.3 and 1.03. I like that. That gives me just a little bit of variance. So you never know about the silicon lottery, what kind of silicon you've got on your chip. Some of them come out better than the others, and some of them are more tolerant to these changes than others. But you can always make these little changes by 0.1 or so, and just keep booting the system and testing until you get it dialed in. But starting with those recommended settings is a good place to be. We're going to start here with 0.3, 1.03, and I'm going to save those settings. Oh, let's go save and exit. And now we're going to reboot. We're going to reboot and run some more tests and go from there. Let's see what we get.
All right, we're back at the desktop. Let's go ahead and pull up our Cinebench and pull up hardware info. And rerun these tests with our new settings. Don't update right now. So again, we're watching CoreVid V-core, we want these to be generally in the same ballpark when you're running at full maximum threshold. And we're also going to watch our CPU thermals, make sure that we're not pushing 100 degrees anymore. So again, I've got minimum test duration turned to off so I can run one cycle, and we're going to start this run. So running Cinebench, last time we immediately went to 100 degrees on our CPU, and already you can tell we're barely pushing 89 degrees, 90 degrees on our CPU temp. That's 10 degree difference. It's pretty substantial. And our voltage 1.3, 1.13, and 1.5, quite close enough for me. I don't remember that exact number. I'll put these up at the end of the video, but I'm pretty sure it was 34 or 35. So you see no performance loss on our pass on Cinebench. And let's go ahead and run another benchmark on Call of Duty. Close out of this. Run one more benchmark just to see and show that we're not sacrificing any performance by changing these settings. So if this looks good, I'd call it a win, because anytime you can save 10 degrees just by a simple setting and not lose any performance, that's substantial, especially, like again in my case, on a small form factor system with a limited cooler size, an AIO 240. So dropping back into Call of Duty. Multiplayer is the only place you can run this benchmark. Graphic settings, benchmark, settings are the same. Go ahead and start. And let's let the benchmark run and see what we get this time. Here we go. So looking pretty much right where we were. I don't really see any differences whatsoever. But we'll see what the final result is and get them up side by side here at the video finishes. If only I were in lobbies like this, I could be an esports pro. These are not the lobbies me and my buddy plays in. Took us a full day or two to get a dub in the new Squid Game version. Some of those numbers jumped up pretty good there. So I remember 113 is a low for my first, but everything else was above the limit. These look very similar to what I had before. Again, in post, I'll put these side by side so we can see before and after. But as you can see, I'm not losing any performance, and really I wouldn't expect to lose any here because I'm not really pushing processor. This is a GPU throttling that's happening, 99% bottleneck. But anytime I'm pushing the CPU at all and it starts to heat up, I do get that fan noise if it gets too hot. So these changes have made a big difference for me, keeping my system cooler, and I practically don't hear the system at all whenever I'm in a game. Let's back out. So we're going to stop here, and in post I will pull this up and show you what we got before and after. So looks like we picked up another 1300 some odd on Cinebench, and these screenshots were taken at times when hardware info wasn't showing all the results, but it looks like we lost about almost 10 degrees on Celsius on temperature, and no change in our frame rate. I wouldn't give this too much credit. It looks like I wouldn't expect to see any difference here. Anyway, good luck to y'all. Hope this works for you.